Hey kids, we're back again. This is Mr. Harris. Today we want to talk about the road to World War II for Germany, and this is part one. It'll be a two-parter, all right? Because we know it's a lot of information, a lot of years that we're covering. It talks about the rise of Germany to um, this power to be one of the main reasons that we enter World War II, or there is a World War II. Okay. All right, so one of the first things we have to go back and look at the impact of the Manchurian and Abyssinian crisis. All right, and we know that the League was pretty useless. The failure of the Leagues over Manchuria and Abyssinia, it left a lot of nations and weaker nations defenseless. All right, and remember, a lot of countries are starting to seek these expansionist policies as a result of the Great Depression and as a result of the League really not holding up to its purpose. All right. So Manchuria and Abyssinia were again occupied by these foreign powers, and of course, Italy and Japan left the league and kept the territory they acquired. So not only did they leave, they kept the territory. No one put a check on that. All right. And of course, Britain and France, which are the two world's main powers that are obligated to the league. All right, and their weakness presented a lot of issues, and with the league itself, and um, they sort of started to find different ways in dealing with these dictators. All right, one of the main ones that we'll look at will be the appeasement. Appeasement of Hitler, just sort of trying to let him acquire land or acquire certain demands. As long as we can sort of keep peace. All right, um, but nevertheless. Rearmament did occur because many democracies did face the fact as the 1930s started to unfold that we will be fighting another war. All right, so of course the Manchurian and Abyssinian crisis destroyed the idea of collective security. Remember, the Abyssinian crisis was almost seen as a death blow to the League. All right, because of the League's inability to act. All right, and it also destroyed the credibility of the League as a peacekeeping organization. Now we're going to look at the seeds of World War II. All right, so one of the things that many people hoped to establish is permanent peace, but of course the Great Depression, as I stated earlier, sort of threw a curveball. All right, and we see the rise of these aggressive militaristic uh, regimes such as Germany, Italy, and Japan. Hitler took over Germany in 1933. All right, and we'll look at that a little bit when you come to class. And everything about his foreign policy challenged the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Remember, Germany always felt as if it were mistreated, treated very harshly with the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and those seeds are still there. They never went away. All right. Now, it was not just extremists who wanted to overturn the terms of the peace settlement. So this was your everyday, your German-speaking people. All right, that were within the German boundaries or not. All right, they sort of did want to overturn some of the terms of this peace treaty. All right, and of course Gustav Stresemann, who was the Chancellor of Germany, all right, and Foreign Minister between 23 he and 29, was in some respects similar to those of Hitler. He just believed in working cooperatively with other nations, trying to get the terms of the treaty sort of reduced or reassigned to um, in Germany's favor, and Hitler, on the other hand, was ready to use force, as you see here. All right. Now, of course, the collective security began to crumble under the Great Depression. All right, and this sort of helped Hitler to sort of rise to power. All right, and he was helped by the weakness of the system set up to enforce the peace settlement. Now, it gave no security against determined aggressors. This whole idea of collective security. All right. Um, as long as nations wanted peace. And some nations, in many cases, as we see, didn't necessarily want peace. They wanted to achieve their ends. All right. Now, once again, we always have these differences between Britain and France. The British felt that Germany had been treated harshly with Versailles, and they wanted and were willing to make concessions. The French, on the other hand, were fearful of Germany becoming too strong again. All right, and they wanted to avoid another war, and Britain and France responded to Hitler's demands with a policy of appeasement. All right, once again, appeasement, just a simple definition, is making concessions to him in the hope that he would be satisfied. All right, so of course it dates to Neville Chamberlain, who was the British Prime Minister between 1937 and 1940. It was also followed by Britain almost the time Hitler came to power, so this policy has been into place. Most British politicians did not believe, once again, that the terms were fair or favorable to Germany. All right. Now, appeasement assumed that Hitler would keep his side of the bargain. All right. But everyone sort of doubted the fact that appeasement would work. All right. And basically, they were trying to do anything to avoid going to war. So, that means giving in to these concessions from Hitler. And we'll look at a couple of those things between this lecture and the next one. All right. One of the central aims of the League of Nations was to uphold the Treaty of Versailles. Of course, he sort of destroyed that. All right. And there was no one that was ready or able to stop him. All right. So, once again, Germany is going to leave the League of Nations and this disarmament conference. All right. So, the League of Nations held this disarmament conference, which started in 1932 and dragged on unsuccessfully in 1933. And the Germans took a hardline stance. They basically said, yes, we'll accept the terms of disarmament, but every nation should accept the terms of disarmament. It's not everyone's going to gang up on Germany. All right. And if not, then they wanted to increase their armaments or the military levels to that of the French, their neighbor. All right. So it was either, hey, everyone disarms, or we match our arms with the French. Well, of course, every nation is not going to disarm. So that was sort of unrealistic. And the French, of course, said, no, we're not disarming. And we are definitely not allowing Germany to sort of rearmament. All right. This gave Hitler an excuse to leave the conference. Not only did he leave the conference, he's sort of going to withdraw from the league. And this was sort of he was pretending that Germany wanted peace with this whole disarmament, but he knew that that was unrealistic. All right. Now, so it was no secret, however, that Germany had been secretly rearming, all right, dating back to that Treaty of Rapallo with Russia. All right. On the same day of the disarmament conference, Hitler withdrew Germany from the League of Nations, as I said. Now, another instance that we wanted to see here is the population of the Saar. All right. It placed the Saar, which is this important coal mining area, on the Franco-German border. And this was sort of one of those places that were under contention, but it was under the League of Nations administration for 15 years. All right. And so finally in 1935, the people of the Saar, they voted actually to return to become a part of Germany. All right. And this sort of vote sort of gave Hitler his means to use it as propaganda. All right. And this sort of increases international impact, and it promised to make no further claims on French territory. All right. So this gave Germany's claims to Alsace-Lorraine up. All right, which had, of course, been lost with the Treaty of Versailles. Another thing, Germany, the Air Force, Hitler announced that Germany had a military air force, the Luftwaffe, and that he was introducing conscription, which we know that conscription is compulsory military service. All right, he wanted to expand the army of over 500,000. All right. Now, like I said earlier, there was no secret that Germany had been rearming. Britain, France, and Italy decided at one point in time, in 1933, sort of say, hey, we're going to form this Strasser Front, all right, and we're going to condemn Germany's rearmament, and they were going to work together to preserve the existing treaties that were in place, including the Treaty of Versailles, all right. But of course, Hitler knew and called it bluff that they weren't ready to take any action if need be. So continue on with rearmament and conscription. Now, there was the Anglo-German Naval Treaty, all right, in June 1935. Very important. This treaty allowed Germany to build a navy 35% the size of Britain. So not quite as big as Britain's, but 35% to that level of that level. All right, it seemed to guarantee Britain's permanent naval superiority over Germany, but it was also consistent with the whole appeasement deal. All right, saying, okay, we'll let you sort of start building your navy, but you can't build it up to our levels, but you can build a navy. All right, and it totally ignored the naval restrictions in the Treaty of Versailles, this whole naval agreement, and of course, it included the possession of submarines and battleships. All right. So by officially signing this treaty, Britain recognized that the military terms, of the Treaty of Versailles were dead. All right, because they were the major power to oversee this. All right. With that decision to sign this agreement, they consulted neither France nor Italy. All right, and of course, that whole stressor front that sort of was signed to upholding the existing treaties was sort of collapsed. So that was pointless or useless. All right. The German reoccupation of the Rhineland. The Rhineland remained demilitarized. All right. Remember that buffer zone? All right. And so this is pursuing a more aggressive policy in the East meant that the Rhineland would first have to be made secure. All right. So from March 1936, Hitler took a big gamble by marching his troops into the demilitarized zone. All right. Now, his armies weren't prepared for war, and he did not know exactly if Britain and France would react to his marching into this demilitarized zone. All right. Of course, the French would not act alone, and the British saw no reason to risk war in order to stop Hitler. So there it is. The French weren't going to do it without the British, and the British said no. All right. Remember that whole policy of appeasement. That's sort of going to drive Britain foreign policy. All right. So Hitler used force, and no one stopped him. All right. So Hitler's success, of course, made it easier. Japan has been successful in its foreign policies. Italy, to some extent. All right. So the Rome-Berlin axis, which was not necessarily a formal alliance, but an informal agreement between Hitler and Mussolini to sort of work together. All right. That was in 1936. And also the Anti-Comintern Pact of 1936 committed Germany and Japan to hostility towards the Soviet Union. And Italy joined, of course, in 1937. All right. So basically, in 1939, we're going to see this full military alliance between Germany, Italy, and later on in 1940 to include Japan. All right. So Anschluss, March 1938. Why did Hitler invade Austria? All right. This is very important. Austria, of course, was a German country, both by language and by culture. So they really identified with Germany. Of course, Hitler was raised in Austria, and he had the desire, and it was well known, to unite all of German-speaking people. Now, the Treaty of Versailles forbade the union of Germany and Austria, which we call Anschluss. All right, but nevertheless, everyone knew Hitler's intention, and that this sort of was obvious what he was trying to do and accomplish here. All right. So just with this whole in Austria, give you a little background here. Nazi Party already existed. All right. In 1934, the Nazi murdered the Austrian chancellor during an attempted takeover, and this failed when Mussolini threatened to intervene. And at this time, Mussolini was kind of suspicious of Hitler and regarded Austria as being in Italy's sphere of interest. So they were going to intervene, with this attempted takeover. All right, but that failed. All right, so there was a replacement, Schuschnigg, who agreed to appoint Nazis to the government. But in 1938, the Austrian police raided Nazi headquarters in Vienna and found plans to take over the government after they sort of received some concessions to take part in this government. So, nevertheless, that sort of was put down, and this Anschluss, making concessions to Hitler, Schuschnigg hoped to preserve Austrians' independence. All right. However, he did announce that a plebiscite would be held for the Austrians to decide whether or not Austria would remain an independent nation. So he was going to allow the people to vote on this matter. All right, so it wasn't his aim was to keep Austria independent, but he was going to let the people decide. However, the plebiscite was actually postponed, so he didn't allow people to vote on this. All right, and the Austrians agreed and demanded the replacement of Schuschnigg because he's kept putting it off and wouldn't allow people to vote. All right, and Seyss-Inquart became chancellor. All right. So, nevertheless, the following day, Germany is going to invade Austria. All right, and it was met with no resistance from Austrians. All right, and there was no bloodshed in this invasion. All right, Austria was actually absorbed into Germany, and the Anschluss occurred. Guess what? Britain and France did not intervene. So, this plebiscite was eventually held on 10 April. People got to vote. and over 90% of Austrians approved Germany to absorb this territory. All right, and there you have it, my friends. First part of this Germany road to World War II. Excuse me.